Well, welcome to the Mindscape Psychedelic Institute Podcast. I am Kerby and excited to have you here and excited to have my guest and friend, Peter Berv. As per usual, versus me giving an intro, I prefer them to give the intro so they could introduce themselves. They know who they are. So let's start with that. Peter, can you just share with folks who you are and what you do?
Sure thing. Thanks for the invitation to be here today. Really grateful for the opportunity. I'm Peter Berv. I live outside Denver, Colorado, and we'll be talking about human design today. I've been a human design analyst for about 9 years, experimenting with the system for about 15 years, and it's just been really one of my pillars of coming back home to myself, of awakening back to my true nature, along with my plant medicine work and shamanic practice. To me, the two really have gone hand in hand, and it's what I like to use in my counseling practice to support other people with those two primary modalities. Otherwise, I've also had a bodywork practice for 25 years. I've got a family. I got two kids. I wear several hats. I got my feet in different worlds, and yeah, these tools have been really amazing for me and for my friends and family and clients over the years.
Yeah, well, we had an opportunity to do a reading on me the other day. Peter knows that I've always been a little bit of a skeptic. My wife is a huge advocate, and after our reading the other day, I could see why. Some of the points that were brought up all week long since we've had the reading, I'm like, oh, that's where I am in this right now. Makes total sense. This is what's coming next. Need to refresh, rejuvenate. So it was fascinating. So I think this would be a great podcast to share folks what it is and how it operates. So we'll start off with, can you just give just a brief overview on what human design is, maybe how it originated?
Sure thing. Well, I'll start by sharing what it is. It's basically it's a whole system, and I would say it's almost like a mystical science. It is really a logical system. That's what it comes down to is it shows our genetic activations, and in the most simple way to say it, once you see your individualized activations, it shows you how to make good decisions. We make decisions all day long and all through our life, and every single one of those decisions creates the whole trajectory of our life. So it's a decision-making tool, and also when you get to see a map of your true nature, of your wiring, then it's also a framework to really come to love yourself. So that's really what I say, to love and accept yourself for who you are. So that's what I say to people is it's a decision-making tool, and it's a framework to love yourself. So because that's kind of the great disease of humanity, really, is self-hatred. So learning to see ourselves for who we really are, and really see it in this concrete map. Human design gives us it generates a body graph, which shows your very specific imprinting in your wiring based on your genetic activations. So, and there's a whole science how that's calculated, and so it shows us your wiring, but it also shows where your sensitivity lies. And when you look at a body graph, it shows you where your openness is. So we have what's coming out of us and what's coming into us, and most of us are making decisions about what's coming into us our whole life. And so when we make decisions through the openness, it always ends up meeting resistance somehow. It always ends up leaving us feeling frustrated or bitter or disappointed or angry about something, and it starts to feel like it's a problem with ourselves, that we turn it on ourselves or we turn it upon the others or on the world. And so once you actually see the mechanics of very logical, concrete mechanics of how that operates, it gets the mind on board to go, oh, that's what I'm doing. Everything I thought was a problem was actually me just trying to make decisions from an inconsistent place that just never gets the results that I really want. So it's really a framework. It's a map to make decisions from your most authentic nature. And the place that it came from was it's kind of a weird story, but it was basically a revelation that this guy received. He was a total skeptic, wasn't mystical at all, wasn't on a mystical path whatsoever, and ended up having this experience where he was kind of paralyzed in this light for 8 days, and this voice gave him all this information, which he ended up spending about 25 years unpacking. And as someone myself, and probably a lot of you, who've had near-death experiences or some kind of mystical experience, it takes a while to integrate and to explain it and to understand it. And so the fact that he spent 25 years kind of explaining and unpacking this whole system, which is really only validated through our own experience. That's why we call it a human design experiment. It's not a belief system. It's not philosophical. It's really a system that's meant to be applied directly. So it's been validated by hundreds of thousands of people for themselves. So there's no way this could have been made up. When I first came into this, I was at a very skeptical time in my life. I just had my first kid. I was kind of a little jaded with some of the spiritual stuff I'd been through, and so I was at a point where I thought, unless I can really validate it for myself, it's all just a concept that's out here. So when I saw this system that claims to be a synthesis of several other different mystical systems, I thought, who threw this together to try to make a few bucks? So you can't just do that. So at the time, I was in my first marriage, and my wife at the time said, just go get a reading, just try to hold judgment, go get a reading, and then take it from there. So I did. Well, 5 hours later, this guy had to kick me out of his house because I could not believe what he was telling me just based on my birth time. So accurate and so much subtle detail that I thought there's no way you could know that about me. These are little things that I couldn't even put into words about myself. So right away I was hooked, and I've just been going since. That was 15 years ago.
Wow. But and again, if I ask some of these and put you on the spot, I don't. But what would be a good description of the difference between it and like astrology?
Mm-hmm. That's a great question. Well, the primary difference, that specifically comparing human design to astrology, because human design has elements of astrology in it, but it's not
Right.
really specifically astrology. The astrological component of human design helps explain certain activations which show up actually in the body. And and but taking it even deeper, astrology, or traditional astrology, shows us your activations at the time of birth. So it shows well, we call that like your conscious imprint, who you think you are, and what you identify with. Well, what human design shows us is a whole other imprinting. It shows a very crucial imprint that happened a few months before we were born, and it's the imprinting of our vehicle, our bodies, and we call that your unconscious. So astrology, traditional astrology, doesn't take the unconscious imprint into consideration. So in that sense, we could say human design is a lot more embodied, and because it
Sure.
actually shows these imprints in the body, and how your vehicle operates, and shows you things that you can't actually have access to. It shows your unconscious imprint. So by being able to see that, and seeing how, you might have an unconscious channel or an unconscious gate or some kind of unconscious activation, it gives a whole other level of information, and it informs us a whole other level of decision making and self-love.
Makes sense. So if you're into astrology, this is, I don't like to say a step up. It's just more additional information on top of that.
Hmm.
Um, this is an interesting part. And again, if I get it wrong, please correct me. But from our conversation, I understood there's 5 different types of human design, like manifestor, generator, manifesting generator, projector, reflector. Can you explain like what they are, or how they interact differently?
Hmm. Some people will say there's 5 types. I tend to say there's 4 types, because generator and manifesting generator are still the same type. Because when we're talking about types, what we're specifically referring to is the type of aura. And so, and not just blue, green, purple, not like that, but the actual mechanical structure of your energetic field. And so there's so technically, a generator and a manifesting generator have the same type of aura, which is, we'd say, an open and enveloping aura. Manifestors have a closed and repelling aura, a dense aura. Projectors have like a penetrating aura that is able to see into other people and penetrate into other people. And then reflectors have we call it a sampling and resistant aura. So, that might sound a little cryptic right now, but basically, when you understand the the function and ability of the aura, how it operates, that informs how you move through this world. For example, if a generator or a manifesting generator has an open and enveloping aura, that determines the strategy of those 2 types, which is called, every type has what we call a strategy. And that's basically saying, when you understand how your aura mechanically functions, then you can work with it to move through the world, to make decisions, to move through things. So, for instance, a generator or manifesting generator has the strategy to wait to respond, because the generator aura is just open. It needs it needs people to ask you questions for you to hear your response. A projector aura is penetrating. It burrows into other people, but it's kind of intense. So because of that intensity, the strategy of that aura type is to wait to be invited. So that penetrating aura can do what it's here to do, can be recognized for its real gift of seeing deeply. But if it doesn't do that, it'll it'll meet resistance because it feels intense to the other. So um, a manifester has a closed and repelling aura. And it doesn't mean the person is closed and repelling. We're not aware of how our auras function. But when you understand, so a manifestor's strategy is to inform before they initiate, because they're the only type that can really just initiate when they're clear, or when they get an intuitive hit about what they're here to impact in this world. So when they let people know what they're doing before they do it, that dense aura doesn't feel like it's plowing you over. People understand you better, so it meets less resistance. And a reflector strategy is actually um, is to wait through a moon cycle. It sounds kind of weird, but they they're very sensitive people, so they need to kind of feel through um, the the transits that are going on to get a full composite to make an informed decision. So um,
Mm.
anyway,
Well,
we're not aware of our aura, so it's not like we're not aware of it. So, but by following this strategy, what human design shows us is if you follow your strategy, it will help you move through life with the least resistance. As generators, you and I are, I'm a manifesting generator, you're a generator. If we don't follow that strategy, usually what we're doing is we're making decisions with our mind because that's what we're taught. We're taught if you want something to happen, you got to go out and make it happen. American dream or whatever it is. Um, that's what we were taught to value the mind, to value your strategic, goal-oriented thinking, and usually that just ends up leaving us feeling frustrated somehow. So the kind of the essence of what human design shows us is that when you get out of your own way, when you let your natural frequency attract when we get out of the way with our mind, when we don't try to initiate, everything will come to us. So it's actually very uncomfortable process or experiment for the mind because the mind is so used to being in control, which is okay. I mean, that's what not only that's what we're taught, but as children, we don't feel safe, so we start to protect ourselves by feeling like we need to be in control of our lives. So, human design and the master plant teachers, they both have in common that they teach us to let go and surrender and let that, not only that, but life loves us and life will bring us the right things. We just want it to happen yesterday. You know, when we get out of our own way, life will bring it to us in the right timing. And so it's kind of vulnerable for the mind, but then after you start seeing the results, um, you settle into what this means, this path of surrender. So kind of
beautiful. Well, for folks that are tuning in, yeah, your audio sounds great for folks tuning in. I apologize. My audio isn't doing amazing right now, but I hear Peter perfectly, and you don't need to hear from me anyway. So I thought this would be a good time to put some questions from listeners in the chat, and maybe you could take a minute and read a couple questions and tackle them that way.
Sure thing.
The first question is, how can an individual or even yourself use human design, in their daily life, such as relationship, career choices, or personal growth? So how would somebody utilize this? And I know you've tapped on it a little bit, but what are maybe some examples of how you use it or other folks that have used it in their daily life?
I mean, this is really what it comes down to, is the little things, the daily the daily decisions in our relationships, in our work, anywhere you need to make a decision. Um, the other, I'm kind of answering this in a roundabout way. We say in human design the two pillars of this experimenting are following your strategy depending on your auric type, and then the other thing is following your inner authority. And what that means is there's a place inside you which you can recognize, which is meant to be the final decision maker on anything that you're approaching with work, family, relationships, friendship, any decision. So when you can recognize the that very core grounded authentic place in you which goes, yeah, that's my truth, then That might sound kind of obvious or cliche, but if you spent your life being a people pleaser or making decisions from your openness where you're trying to, solve problems that aren't yours to solve, or if you've always been saying yes when you really want to say no, or vice versa, once you can find that place in you, you can say no where you really want to, where you've always been saying yes, and and feel good about it, and feel, and by doing that over and over again, I like to say you start to get your life back. You start to see, oh, I've been basically giving myself away, and I've been making decisions with my mind. Um, so really, it's meant to be applied in all the mundane, practical, little things. That's what I love about it. It's that's why I say it's like a mystical science, because it is very logical. There's not a lot of argument or wiggle room. It's like you either follow your strategy or you don't. And if you don't, you can see the signs of resistance, the frustration or bitterness or anger or whatever it might be. So I don't know if that felt like a repeat, but yeah, I mean, that's kind of, it's meant to be applied in our daily lives. It is the little things where this is meant to come alive.
All right, here's a good question from Mark. Mark wrote, what does a typical session with a client look like when you're working with the human design chart?
Sure thing. So, yeah, I mean, really the best place to start is by getting what I call a foundation reading. And in a foundation reading, what we'll do, it's about 90 minutes to 2 hours, and we'll go over 5 things. We'll go over your type and strategy. We'll go over your inner authority. We'll look at your definition, which is the channels that you have, the specific activations, which indicate your talents and tendencies and gifts and superpowers. And then we'll look at what's called your profile, which is kind of like, everything I've talked about right before that is kind of like your machinery. The profile is sort of like the costume you wear on top of your machinery. So there's 12 different profiles. And then we'll look at your open centers, which shows where your conditioned behaviors are, and where you get to see the specific signposts of when you're trying to make decisions from your mind. And the mind is just layer upon layer of conditioning. And so it's some of the best, most profound work with human design is seeing your open centers and learning to recognize those signs, so you can use that as a reminder to come back to finding that place in you, which is the real core, authentic decision maker.
When we were talking during my design, and again, not to make this about me, but maybe it's a decent example. I remember I was a 3/5, and I shared that with my wife, and she's like, "Oh, that's like a martyr heretic," and she laughed. She knew exactly what that was. She's like, "Nailed it," right? Which is again why I'm fascinated by this. What does that mean to someone that's listening? Like, oh, I'm a 3/5. I'm a whatever it may be. I'm a martyr heretic. I know there's a number of them, but what does that mean?
Yeah, so there's 12 different profiles, and it's a much more specific view into how you play out your role, how you play out your purpose in this world. And so those 2 numbers are basically representing your conscious process and your unconscious process. So I'm also a 3/5. Martyr heretic. So consciously, and a lot of the wording here, a lot of the languaging in human design is quite cryptic. Martyr heretic, that sounds pretty heavy. But basically,
I didn't
what that
like the
means
name.
as a martyr, yeah, as a martyr, that's my that's what you identify. That's what we identify with, and that basically means that's it. It's the part of us which goes, hey, throw me into the mix. I'm ready to get my hands dirty. I'm ready to learn, experiment, and learn the hard way, trial and error process on the material plane. I'm built to throw myself into the material plane. That's why it's called the martyr, because you know we're resilient. We have a certain genetic resilience which is built for that. But unconsciously is that fifth line heretic, which is just really a projection. That word is just a projection. It doesn't mean you are a heretic. It means unconsciously, which is referring to the body. That's what people see in you. So the other side of that spectrum, because everything here operates on a spectrum, the other side of that is like the savior or the person who's going to save the day. That's what people see in you. They think, oh, there's something about that fifth line. People see, oh, you've got it all figured out and you're going to save the day and you're the one I've been waiting for who's going to fix all my problems. But then what you identify with is, sure, I'll try it out and throw myself into it. And if you can meet those projections, you maintain a positive projection as more of the save the day kind of guy. If you don't, and your trial and error side just kind of blunders things a little bit, gets a little messy, a little too messy, doesn't meet their expectations, then they say you're not who you said you were, and I thought you were going to fix this and you just made a mess out of things, and now you get exiled and turned into the black sheep, and it ends up being a theme in our lives. So anyone who's for a 3-5, for example, there's people who really look up to you because you maintain that positive projection, and there's people that think you're a heretic and you get exiled, and they you're not who you said you were, and that whole thing. So it's really meant to be
super
validating.
And
Go ahead. Yeah.
No, I was going to say it's super accurate. We had
there's
touched
12
on it the
different
other
profiles.
day, and again, the analogy. Okay, yeah, I think when I was thinking of martyr the other day, and just again, I didn't love the terminology, but the description is perfect, and I thought of the martyr, just folks, like if we're on one side of a fence and there's a barbed wire fence, or they're one side of the yard and there's a barbed wire fence, and we're curious on the other side, we're the type that will lay ourselves over the barbed wire, right, to like try to kind of get there, try to lead there, so to speak. So we'll take the hits up front because we're like, I'll lay on that fence. I'm curious enough to see what's over there that I'll try to get over that barbed wire fence. And a lot of folks that maybe aren't that designer, or my wife, for example, okay, you made it over there. Okay, now I'll go, right? Versus me, I'm like, let's just try it. And the projection piece that we've touched on before is again very accurate, especially in the work that we do. Or again, I thought of my pastor was one of the examples that people put them, or they project these assumptions on them, or this projection on them, and if they don't meet that, there's a lot of disappointment. So it's a phenomenal. Again, that's what really turned me on to this, in the sense of like, that is absolutely spot on. Somehow, again, going back to the science of it. So it's absolutely phenomenal, and couldn't be more accurate. Which leads to the next question from Jen. She's like, how do you respond to skepticism or criticism regarding human design? And I was a skeptic, so you met my needs. How would you deal with somebody in general that's a skeptic or criticism?
And that was my that was my story too, which was who put this together, who's trying to make some money. I was a total skeptic when I came into this. So I actually love skeptic. I say, come to me with all your skepticism, and the greater the skeptic, the more fun I have. I'm not afraid of it. And what I'd say is, this is an experiment. You don't have to believe anything I'm saying. It's try it out for yourself, and validate it for yourself. This is very, like I said, it's logical, which means there's it's like the scientific method. You have a hypothesis, and you test it and you validate it for yourself to see if it's real. So, I mean, so I would say, get a reading. And same thing, same thing I was told. Go hold your judgment till you get a reading, and then try it out for yourself and see if it works for you. And it's not for everybody. So, I mean, I have someone I'm in a conversation with right now that's saying, I just straight up disagree with this, and that's okay. It's not really meant to be for everybody, like any system isn't for anybody. But it really comes down to, you can sit there and piece it apart mentally and question this and question that, but that's not the point of it. The point of it is for you to learn how to make decisions for yourself and to love and accept yourself as you are. So, and the only way to really try it is to validate for yourself. So, um, it comes
Yeah.
down to some very simple tools. It can seem very mental and complicated and cryptic, but it ultimately comes down to some very simple practices.
I was going to ask you, for folks that are listening that again are maybe new to this and just want to put their toe in the water. Like what's one simple step they can take, after this podcast? Obviously, I'm going to encourage folks to spend some time with you, meet you, go through the whole process. But maybe somebody's first step. What would be a first step they could take after this podcast and maybe explore this a little bit further, in your opinion?
hmm If you have the opportunity to get a foundation reading, I really recommend that, and not just trying to do a sales pitch. It's just it is slightly cryptic, and you can only do. I found that doing the self study can take you kind of far, but it can also get people a little more confused, because they don't know really how to prioritize certain things, or what's you can go down a lot of rabbit holes that can just be more distracting. But if that's not on your
Mhm.
radar, I'd say at least go to, figure out what your type is. If you can figure out your type and authority and experiment with that, you can go to, one of the main websites I recommend is called mybodygraph.com. One word, mybodygraph.com.
Mm.
And put in you have to know your accurate birth time. Uh, and so you plug that in and you get to see, am I a generator, a projector, a manifester, or a reflector? And that will inform you on your strategy. And then, that will also show you which centers you have defined. And there's kind of like a hierarchy of the centers. Which ones you have defined will determine your inner authority. There's also something called outer authority, but you're basically, what's the place in you that you can recognize, which is the place where you're really meant to make your final decisions. And then you can experiment with that and learn to recognize those visceral signs. It's really it's meant to be a very embodied process, not a mental process. So once you can, like 70% of humanity are generators, which means a lot of our navigation system is about your gut response. And you can really get in touch with your gut response by having people ask you questions, because it pulls it out. Ask you yes or no questions, or give you options to choose from. And that's an amazing way to bypass the mind. We can loop and loop and loop all day long, year after year, trying to make decisions. But as soon as you're asked those questions, it just pulls it right out of you, and you can hear the authenticity in your response. If you don't want to do something, and you convince yourself to say yes, it's gonna, yeah, sure. It's gonna sound cut off. If something really feels like a, a real authentic response, you're gonna go, yeah. It's gonna be coming from your gut. It can't lie. So yeah, start with a reading, and if you can't do that, just do some self-study, and at least figure out what your type and authority are.
Yeah. Well, and again, I would encourage folks to obviously sit with you, have a reading. Um, it's something I found extremely valuable. But again, I'm interested. My wife was very, very jealous that I had a chance to have a reading. And my wife is one of the most skeptical people I know, right? And in so many areas, she's a licensed marriage family therapist. So it's all, this is it, this is the brain, this is how it operates. But she absolutely believes this wholeheartedly, which surprised me, to be honest. That's just not usually the lane that she's in. So obviously, I
Hmm.
recommend folks have a conversation with Peter. Another thing to do is, you'd be shocked how many of your friends or people you know have done human design or human design readings. All the time, I'm having conversations with people, and if I brought up human design, like, oh, I'm a three. They have their numbers, they know where they're at, and they're fascinated. So again, if you have any skepticism in you, which is okay, just really ask around you. I think you'd be surprised how many people have gotten involved in this, believe in this, and utilize it. There's tons of Facebook groups. There's tons of groups out there that, again, are full of highly intellectually, highly intelligent people, not the woo, right? Doesn't feel woo-y to me at all. It feels like a form of a science to it. So, I mean, for
Hmm.
sure do that. But again, just ask around. I think you're going to be surprised how many friends are involved in it.
Hmm.
Um,
Well,
but,
can I respond to that
and
for
I
one
know you
second?
touched on this again, but for you, please, absolutely.
Because there is a lot of there are a lot of offshoots that are kind of coming out, which do try to make it a little bit more of
Mm,
a wooey, what for better lack of a better word, kind of thing, because and um, that's still the mind trying to make it, kind of polarizing things. What human design kind of shows us is that when you can see the mechanics behind the scenes. That's why it's called human design. It's basically showing the human matrix. That was part of the revelation that was shown is this our matrix. So when you can see the mechanics, it takes off the good and the bad and the right and the wrong and the black and the white, which is what we've been addicted to for so long. And when you start to see things for what they are, and just it helps you come to awareness and acceptance about those things. And there's still a lot of people, there's no morality attached to that. It's just we're so addicted to that, this is good and this is bad, this is right and this is wrong, that people even take human design and try to turn it into a very flowery, new agey kind of thing in some places. It's all out there. So I tend to, you know, it's there's not a lot of fireworks and smoke and mirrors here, and it's very practical. So I just say in your explorations, if you come across something that's trying to make it a little bit more uh, flowery or glitter covered, then just keep on looking till you find the right person. Because you got to find the right person to that you connect with for this, because it can do more damage, honestly, if it's delivered the wrong way.
yeah, and that's kind of human nature, right? Is to take something, we see it in almost any modality, how it is, but I've got better ideas. Let's do it this way, and that makes it personal to them, kind of elevates their personality. I don't know what personality type that would be in human design, but it's very common for folks to start shifting and recreating and taking it different ways. And that's why, again, I wanted to have you on the podcast. You're somebody that, I say this wholeheartedly, somebody I have the most respect for and trust with, and I wouldn't have brought you on and encouraged folks to spend the time to sit with you if I didn't believe that. Which is also why I feel more pulled and called to this. If it wasn't you and it was somebody else, I might be like, they're up to something here. I don't feel that, obviously, and that's not never the case. So again, I would absolutely encourage folks to take some time with you, because I do see how my wife utilizes it in her day-to-day life, decision-making processes, or even my own process over the last 4 to 5 days since the reading of, oh, I see where I'm peaking right here, like I'm on the high, so to speak. I got all the energy in the world, creating like a mad scientist, and then I could feel I'm peaking, and I'm probably going to be coming down this the other side, which in the past created some level of shame or misunderstanding of what's happening there. But now
Mhm.
that I have a better tool to navigate that, like I could already see what's happening and I'm already start preparing myself for it.
Mhm.
So that's super invaluable in your day-to-day life.
Yeah, we
Um,
call it a no fault system, which is so
mhm.
beautiful because everyone's always looking for a reason or always looking to blame themselves or someone else for their problems. And this takes the problem off all of it. It just brings it back to a mechanical
Yeah,
perspective. Um,
I
yep.
love that. I know you again touched on this earlier, but how do you or how would other people? Well, let's talk about you specifically because I know what you also do, some of the other work that you do. How
Mhm.
does this really incorporate into some of these other modalities that you're utilizing? I mean, it seems like it would incorporate into all areas of somebody's life, but how are you utilizing it with some of the shamanic practices and just some of the other things that you do with folks?
I find the human design work and the plant medicine work are a really wonderful complement together because, well, the human design um, helps us see really where to put our attention. So you can go into a ceremony and be focusing on trying to fix something that you think is a problem when it's not. You can spend, how much money and time and energy can you use trying to fix yourself and heal yourself when suddenly you realize this wasn't even a problem. I was just focusing, I was trying to figure out life through the wrong angle. So, in that sense, human design can really help the medicine work. And then the medicine work really helps the human design side of it because you can't hide, when you with the medicine work. So it really grounds it into our nervous system. Because the mind is very tricky. The mind thinks, oh, I figured that out, I've worked on that, and then you go into like some kind of ceremony or deep work, and it brings all the stuff right there for you to really look at and see, oh, there's still more there to bring awareness to. So they really inform each other very well, I find. And they both teach you how to surrender deeper. They give you a framework for how to surrender. Surrender is kind of a weird word. It's not something you can mentalize your way through. And so human design and the plant medicine work both teach you that you have how to give birth to yourself, how to love yourself.
Well, it's interesting that you bring that up because, not to plug myself, but I will. But as we teach our facilitator courses, et cetera, the objective for me is always for them to encourage them to find some other modalities that could work in that space because most of them aren't therapists, right? But because of the work that we do, there's some level of care that's needed, right? So to me, this could be a tool that, so to speak, they're not necessarily doing therapy with folks. That's for therapists, but it's a way to help people through whatever processes they're doing in their life. So I think again, if you're a facilitator, have a reading, see if it feels aligned with you, but maybe something to consider, right, as an additional modality to what you're already doing.
Hmm.
What do you think of that? I just kind of pulled that out of the air, but that's what was coming to
Yeah.
me. Would you agree with that or disagree?
I would agree with that, and that's kind of what I love about human design is it's not really therapy, so I'm not bound to um, the certain industry, ethical guidelines that you know, um, and it's not that I'm not ethical. It's just I can show someone the mechanics straight up, and
Right.
it's not always comfortable. It's not always easy to talk about, but you know, we've been banging our head against the wall for year after year, lifetime after lifetime. And so um, it's a real privilege to be able to say, look at the mechanics, this is it, it's not easy to undo that, but um, it's just all right there. And so you can point things out which are very vulnerable, and
Yeah.
I keep a box of tissues right there when I do my readings, when I do them in person, because it's shattering. It's we use that term. It's shattering to who you've been, this box you've been trying to fit yourself into. And so, and it's validating to for someone to, it's very intimate, to be seen so deeply and to be validated so deeply. So I love that it's it's very therapeutic, but I'm not bound to, you know, therapeutic guidelines as a professional in that sense. I'll just tell you like it is, tell you what I see. I won't hold back.
For sure. I mean, yeah, I mean, there are levels to all of this stuff. And I mean this humbly, again, no different if you're trying to find a facilitator to work with, right? You want to find out that somebody has experience, good training in this, and have been doing this for a period of time. No different than this. So again, even if, as I'm encouraging facilitators to potentially consider this, again, we have a tendency to get a reading and then I'm a human design person. No, we want to find folks that are highly trained, understand exactly what they're doing, and have a lot of experience in this space. Because as you mentioned, just like in the plant medicine space, if you're not trained properly, you can create more damage than good, even if you go into it with the right intentions of trying to help somebody. So again, why Peter's on the show is it's somebody I trust and believe and that has that experience. And if you're going to do it, like anything, I think, especially something so intimate and deep and personal, do it right? Do it right, and find the right folks. Couple more for you. This one I think you touched on, but
can I add just one quick thing to that?
Go ahead.
On that
Please.
note, we say it's a
Yeah.
It's a 7-year deconditioning process. The almost the first level of working with this system takes 7 years. And people hear that and they go, why so long? I've already done so much work on myself, and it's because it takes time to see these things. It takes time to see your openness. It takes time to get to know, to isolate and recognize those inner voices from your true self or your not self, whatever you want to call it. It takes time, decision by decision, day by day. So 7 years is just the beginning. And while that might seem like a long time, it's really not. When you think about how many lifetimes have we been banging our head against the wall trying to figure it out through our mind. And so, and then, but once you see those things and embody more your authentic nature, it's permanent. It's so, to me, 7 years, it's also something there's something peaceful about it for me to settle into, to know that life takes time. Well, there's a maturation process, there's an unfolding process where we come from such a culture of quick fixes and wanting everything yesterday and strategizing to manifest everything yesterday. And so I really like this process of, you take it easy, decision by decision, you'll come to see yourself, see things. It just starts to come out. And so I like that. It feels more aligned with a natural maturation process. So what's the question?
I had this thought the other day that my wife and I were.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
What's that?
Go ahead.
Yeah. No, I was going to say, and again, I apologize, folks, if my internet's a little sketchy here, but again, I hear Peter perfectly, which is the most important piece. I just had this thought the other day, again, as I'm teaching this 5-MEO facilitation course, right? That the question to the group is, this is a tool for long-term growth, correct? Yes. That means ourselves included. Yes. Well, have you been able to obtain long-term growth in the short term, right? It's like we tell folks this is for long term. Well, how long have you been working with it in yourself? Well, a year. that's a very short period of time. In my mind, it's like, and the thought was, as you have these experiences, or same as human design, you get this information, you have to almost relive your entire life with this new lens. Everything that I experienced prior to having this experience, so to speak, was through this programmed or unauthentic lens, whatever you feel comfortable saying, versus now you have some level of insight or awakening, whatever you want to use. Well, that's a brand new set of lenses. I need to go through almost the entire life all over again with this new lens to really fully grasp all the benefits of it. And that's why I love the concept of Buddha, like child's mind. It's like we're relearning all over again. So
Mhm.
yes, you can get these insights. Yes, you could provide information to people, but now you have to experience like life through this new lens of information. And there's no fast way of doing that. People don't want to hear that. They're like, well, I just can't do this for a weekend and then do this. No, you have to relive your entire experience almost, if that makes sense. Um, yeah.
Yeah, 100%.
Um, just for a few minutes, I know we've got a few minutes left. Yeah, good. I'm glad that that didn't sound too nutty, because it makes perfect sense to me. And again, especially in this, this culture of, even, weekend certifications, right? We have an integration course. Yes, the course is, 10 to 15 hours long. Well, just because you went through the course, you still have to master these skills. Like that's never going to happen in 3 days. It's over and over and over and over. And that's why it's, again, to find somebody that has the skill and qualifications to do it, if you're going to do it right. Um, where do you see this field evolving? Positively, I think you've touched on potentially some of the negatives, like people are now taking this and repackaging it maybe in their own way with their own systems involved. But do you see an evolution in a positive direction for this as well?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. One of the most, I'd say, promising things that human design has showed me is that we're moving into a time where we're developing, like the focus of humanity will be about developing emotional intelligence or spiritual intelligence, spirit awareness. And so, um, and we're going to see the full spectrum of that. There's going to be a lot of, everything comes with a spectrum, but I think we're moving into an era of uh, of spiritual development, and so I look forward to that. Human design also has another perspective. Part of the revelation that was given is not just the human matrix, but this kind of global cycles that we go through. And in the next few years, we'll be entering a new cycle, and it really gives a what I find to be a helpful understanding of some of the massive crises and changes the planet is going through. Um, there's a lot of things that are falling apart, and human design gives a very specific framework for that. So it's to me, this is actually a very helpful tool to surf through these coming changes on the planet so we can have some greater context and empower ourselves and our local communities during these changes. And that there's um,
Love that. Well,
supposedly a new species that's well, not really a species, but a mutation within our species that's happening, and there'll be new children that are going to start being born in the coming years, which are bringing this mutation, who are carrying this emotional intelligence and development on the planet. So we'll start seeing these. So this is giving a framework to understand some of the mutations that science and the media aren't necessarily documenting in the same way.
interesting. Yeah, I'd like to learn a little bit more about that. But for time's sake, I want to give you the floor. Is there anything you want to share with folks that we haven't touched on, or anything that you want to talk about that you think is important as we had this conversation about human design?
Oh, let's see. Um, you know, kind of just recapping everything we talked about, start experimenting with it. The only way to know is to know for yourself. And that's kind of the essence of what the system is about, is we all are working with the same genetic building blocks, and yet in that paradox, everybody is unique. Everybody is built to be unique and has their own purpose. And you can see your purpose. You can see the mechanics of your uniqueness. Um, and then you don't have to compare yourself to anybody. I mean, that's a lot of how our mind harnesses the self-hatred, is we compare ourselves to other people, and that's what that brings in, all the blame and all that stuff. So this takes all of that off. So yeah, I mean, I invite you to look into it in whatever way feels right for you, whether it's a self-study or starting with a reading or some classes or online investigation. And um, but it can be a little cryptic at first, but um, ex experiment for yourself, and um, it's a wonderful framework for empowering yourself and loving yourself and those around you. And um, even there's been times where someone maybe rubbed me the wrong way, and then I looked at their design and I go, oh, that's how they were meant to be. There's a I can love them for that. I can accept them for that and not need them to be the way that my mind wants them to be. So that's why, again, that's why I say it's a no fault system. So, and it goes really deep. I mean, this is everything I've talked about today
I
is
love that. No fault system.
hmm hmm it's you can see so much just on the surface layer, just knowing your type and strategy. But then it goes really deep. You can look at how you're meant to take in food, kind of environments where you thrive and are optimal. It can get down to a very subtle level of how you make decisions and how you of your uniqueness. It can get down to the very subtle levels of your uniqueness, which help you understand yourself. So,
Again, somebody whose wife is a therapist that still swears by this. I think it's something people should at least consider exploring, as you mentioned. Again, self-study, that's fine, but I am in agreement with you. Go to somebody that's trained and qualified and get a reading. Let's get right to it. So how can folks that are listening right now learn more about you, connect with you, and potentially find out how to get a reading?
yeah. If you can remember my name, that's my website. Peter Berv, B as in boy, ERV as in Victor, peterberv.com. And that will get you to uh, my website, and then you just follow the human design links to book on there. Um, I mean, I've got a Facebook page, but that all basically leads to the same place. So, yeah, and then you can contact me there if you just want to ask some questions just to find out if it's right for you. But everything can pretty much be, you can either contact me or book a session through that site, peterberv.com, or the same website, humandesigndenver.com will get you there too.
All right, so we'll send them to peterberv.com. I'll put that link and that information in the chat or in the description of the podcast itself, so it'll be easy for folks to reach out and connect with you. So if you didn't write it down, it's okay. It'll be in the description, easy to connect to them. And again, I wouldn't bring them on. I wouldn't have this conversation if it was somebody I didn't trust or didn't have the highest faith or respect for. So again, if this is something that you've been considering or interested in, or as we went through the conversation today, you're thinking, okay, my life could maybe be a little bit better. Maybe this is a tool that could help me navigate this a little bit better with this no fault concept, which I just love, this no fault concept.
Hmm.
So I appreciate you taking some time, and yeah, thank you again.
Wonderful. Thanks, Kirby. Really appreciate it.
I appreciate it.